waiting for welcome everyone. We'll just wait for a few minutes so that more people can join in. I know that the numbers are increasing. We'll just wait for a minute before we begin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this month's virtual thought leadership meet organized by the NHRD Bangalore chapter. It's great to see such great participation. I can see that people are still joining. While they join, a few hygiene items. You have all been put on mute. We will be speaking through the session and sharing certain data points. In the event you want to raise any question or share any kind of reaction, at the bottom of the screen, there is an emoticon option as well as a Q&A option. Please put in your questions there. These questions will be taken up at a suitable point of time. With having said that, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sandhya George. I am the Secretary of NHRD Bangalore chapter. I currently work with Essilor Exotica, and I play a global role in the L&D space. A few updates before we continue, specifically with respect to the happenings of the Bangalore chapter and what we have been doing in the last 1 month or so. Just a quick overview, we have more than 2,000 members. We conduct various programs and initiatives for both HR professionals, academy, and students. Primarily, we have the monthly thought leadership meet, which usually happens on the last Thursday of every month. We conduct learning programs, webinars, book reviews. We also have industry academia meets. We sometimes also partner with corporates and institutes to conduct programs, conferences, specifically for development of the HR fraternity. HR Showcase is a unique trade style event which actually showcases HR best practices. And it's a conference, it's a 2-day conference, which usually happens in the month of November at Bangalore. Just a point on the membership to NHRD. Membership to NHRD will give you access to over 30 chapters across both national as well as international. This membership is valid across the chapters. If you are becoming a member of, say, the Bangalore chapter and you move locations, you can transfer the membership. You just need to inform the host chapter about it. For more details, you can log on to our website, nhdbangalore.com, or you can write to reach us at nhdbangalore.com. Having said that, what happened last month? We kickstarted the month of March with a special offer for women HR professionals, or they could have a 10% off on the membership fees to NHRD. This offer is now closed, but we had more than 10 to 15 women who participated in this offer from Bangalore alone. In addition, we partnered with KDEM, Karnataka Digital Economy Mission, where we conducted a session on women at work. People from all strata of the corporate as well as academia could attend this conference. We closed the month with a thought leadership meet on a perspective on women in leadership. We had three eminent women leaders who participated in this panel discussion, which was ably moderated by Dr. Vishal Shah from Indigene. The panel members were Yasmin Sheikh, who is the VP HR of NextGen Healthcare, Mona MD, who is the Chief People and Culture Officer at Better Place, and Dr. Deepa Nagarajan, who is a founder and director of Yanna Foods. She is also an author. They spoke about various aspects on what they believe is women in leadership. In fact, they also spoke about whether we need to have a specific day called Women's Day. Rather, why not build policies and frameworks specifically dedicated to all the equitable policies for all the employees in a company. What women need to grow and to develop themselves is mentorship and policies within a corporate. So this was, we had more than 100 people participating in this session. And of course, we had to close the session because it was, there were too many questions. And if anybody wants to know more about it, you can go to and follow it on YouTube. In addition to all this, we launched our new revamped and updated website. So please log into nhdbangalore.com for all the latest updates and happenings within NHRD. With that, I'd like to hand over to Chaitanya Srinivas, who's the president of NHRD Bangalore, for a specific announcement.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Sandhya. I'm going to take a quick minute. The NHRD Bangalore chapter is pleased to announce a partnership. It's an exclusive partnership with KPMG in providing training programs to the HR fraternity. That's all of us. Stepping back, the intent of this was really a need to provide training programs to the fraternity on core HR themes and what's happening in the industry and get us future ready. And what we wanted to do was to have it curated and delivered by providers who are known for their training and content, as well as by industry practitioners. So I'm happy to announce this partnership. The KPMG Learning Academy is well known in this respect in the industry. They have designed and will deliver a holistic learning experience for the participants, instructor-led sessions to build the conceptual knowledge, case studies to practice on illustrative business cases, as well as application-based assignments. So it's a very broad area that we're trying to deliver. KPMG's expertise and experience in delivering training and consulting engagements across India, across the world, and so they will help design, deliver these programs with high quality, speed, and flexibility. And of course, all participants will get an NHRD and KPMG certification, as well as certificate of participation. So please look out for these programs. There will be an announcement in the coming days with a lot more details and the content and the sessions, etc. Also, ask you to follow NHRD Bangalore on social media. That is our way of communicating to the larger audience. So please do follow us on the social media. So I just want to make this formal announcement. There's more to come in this, and you will hear a lot more on this. So please do join and use these programs to our benefit. Thank you, and back to you, Sandhya.
Thank you, Chinny. I'm sure everybody is excited to see and look forward to the new training calendar. So with that, I want to also mention that please save the date. 25th May is the next thought leadership meet. We will be having S.V. Nathan, who's a partner, Deloitte India, and also the National NHRD president. He will be talking about how to unlock your true potential using the power of insight. So like I said, watch out for further updates. Follow us on social media. You can, if any specific queries, you can write to reach us at nhdbangalore.com, and the same handle, nhdbangalore is used for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. So please do follow us on this to get instant updates. So with that, I would like to come to the session for today, Organization Design Demystified. We have our speakers, Shan Pretheshan and Arunkumar R. I would like to introduce Arun, who will be the facilitator for the discussion. He's a Vice President, Organizational Development and Design in the banking sector. He holds more than 1,500 hours of experience in all OD projects and across sectors and industries. He's a certified OD professional. He holds certificates in organizational development, coaching, project management, Six Sigma. He has also been a treasurer and executive committee member of NHRD since 2019 till 2022. So with that, I would like to hand over to Arun. Arun, welcome, and looking forward to a very engaging discussion.
Thank you, Sandhya. So with that, can I share my screen, Sandhya?
Yes.
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, Sandhya. So with that, as we move ahead for today's session, I'm also happy to introduce and welcome my colleague for today's discussion, Shan, as Sandhya has already introduced. Let me take a moment to also introduce Shan as we get into today's session. Shan is the founder and also the CEO of Aspire Business Consulting. Comes with more than 25 years of corporate experience of having worked across various organizations, including the IT services firm. And has been specializing in the space of strategy, organization design, business change, and also helping the leaders deliver their organizational ESG goals. And more specifically, over uh, the last multiple years, he has been leading more than 30 plus organization design projects for both public and private sector clients, and is also a board member for the European Org Design Forum, and has trained more than 100 plus practitioners in the org design space. So with that, welcome Shan, and thanks for joining today's session, Shan.
Thank you, Arun, and thank you, Sandhya and NHRD Bangalore chapter team. Great to be here with you and share my experience and knowledge that I've gained throughout my industry experience. So I'll bring to light some of the experience, what are the good things to think about, look at for organization design perspective, and how do you drive value for our customers and stakeholders as well. So on that note, over to you, Arun.
Great, thank you, Shan. So even before we get into the session, we thought we will take a bit of a step back to see through on what is the significance of we having this topic of organization design, and what is the significance of demystifying it for the larger audience. So as we did take a step back, we did see some of the broader emerging trends around us, and we categorized into 5 key trends. So the one, if we look out among around us, we do see the geopolitical uncertainties, the financial market instabilities as what the Fed hikes, and the inflation. All these things seemingly to be forcing the organizations to rethink their strategies. And as the organizations start rethinking their strategies to combat these pressures, naturally it also calls for how do we organize the people to meet these changing strategic priorities. This is one of the trends which we see commonly happening around us. Similarly, we also see that there is a growing realization on the importance to de-risk the operations, especially after pandemic. There is so much of an growing realization for geographic diversification, decentralization, which also results in enhanced investments in the secondary markets like India. The third thing which we also saw happening was some of the existing business models getting disrupted by the new age firms, even be it in terms of the banking sector, the new age fintechs disrupting the traditional business models, or for example, say the emergence of likes of Netflix disrupting the traditional media industries. So that's another big theme that we see happening, which is also posing the organization to revisit the existing operating models or the way it delivers value to the end consumers. The fourth is also in terms of the changing preferences for the larger customers and the employees, including the need for hybrid work and many such preferences, which is also posing the organization to constantly think on how we could be becoming more nimbler, flexible, and create more agile work models. And the last thing, like with all these pressures that are around us, the competitive pressures, we also have witnessed an acceleration in the larger M&A activities. As we tried consolidating these broader themes that were emerging around us, what we see as a common link around all these trends is there seemingly to be an emerging need for the organizations to revisit on how we organize the resources and how we design the organization. So as we talk about it, we also thought of checking like where are the employers today in this journey of organization redesign, especially from an India context standpoint. So one such trend as what we could witness, while it may be slightly and dated research report, but we do see that more than 1/3 of the organizations, or approximately 1/3 of the organizations in India, are actively considering to redesign their organizations, especially with the need arising towards creating a performance-driven culture and a purpose-driven culture, meeting the changing demands of the customers, supporting the change in strategy as what we were talking in the previous slide, changing behaviors and the mindsets, and obviously cutting costs. While we do see such an emerging trend, we also got to know that like many of such design initiatives fall short of meeting the expectations of its intended objective. Therefore, we thought it's important that we see through or like we demystify the topic of organization design for the larger benefit of the business leaders and also the functional experts who are there on this call. So with that, I'm happy to take this conversation ahead with Shan, tapping onto his rich wisdom of having worked with the organizations across the globe. So Shan, like I'm curious to hear from you, basis your past experience of working with multiple organizations. What have you observed as some of the common myths when we talk about the topic of organization design?
It's a great question, Arun. So when I work with senior C-suite leaders and walk into the board to say when they start, they're saying, we want to get our organization redesigned. What they show to me is kind of a structural based organization attributes. So what it means, if you kind of go to the next slide, if we may.
Yeah.
So what they look at is kind of start off with the structure of the organization. They recognize the organization charts. They understand who is leading what are the components of those organization structure. And they say, can you help us kind of change the structure model to meet our needs? Or they already have defined a structure in their mindset part of the conversation. So that's one of the key critical element. One of the examples I'd like to bring to light is recently I was supporting an organization who has got a global presence, and I was helping the head of risk function of that organization to redesign their risk security and compliance activities. And in the first initial meeting itself, to understand what my stakeholder required, he came up with an organization chart diagram and said, Shan, we've designed this piece of paper and we've kind of come up with a structure. Could you help us implement? So the focus is more on the structural starting point. That's what the understanding of what the organization designed in the industries. Also, there are elements of leaders, as I mentioned, to kind of linking that initial example. They've already defined it based on what they want to see the structure need to be, how their leadership need to look like, how do their team structure need to look like, without even considering any work aspects or any outcomes that need to be delivered. It's kind of already feature set to in a kind of context of the structure as well. The third thing, as an example, one of the common questions I've been asked on all my engagement with the clients in a large FTSE 100 organization, globally presence in the utilities and financial sector, government sectors as well, who have operated with other big brands in India, kind of outsourced and working with some of the bigger suppliers to provide services as well. They asked, Shan, we need to do this design. Will it fix my problem, or will it stand in it? What's the durability of that design look like? And what's my predictability? So if we kind of take back on a kind of 2019 before pandemic, a lot of organization leaders have started their operating model transformation. And they started a number of initiatives to transform the organizational structure, organization, how to pivot their business model. But what do we see in general term during pandemic? All organizations have to shift rapidly to a hybrid ways of working or more of a digital enable. So the predictability and durability can't be fixed from a design perspective, because there'll be events taking place internally or externally, which need to be looked at all lens as part of the design aspects as well. And one of the other leaders trying to think is, if we reorganize the structure, we can fix the problem. That's kind of the common met in the leadership team. And they engage with the C-suite and say, right, okay, we will have a sponsor ready to support those organization design. And the sponsor will say, right, we need to resolve or restructure our internal team structure, and the management tier will change as well. So the durability and predictability is not possible at all when you do the design and drive it. So it needs to be looked at in a multi-lens as well. Then the other elements I've seen kind of working for a global organization, one of the energy utility organization, their operations is supported by South African, organization-based operation, India-based, US-based, UK-based, and also Dublin-based as well. Each of the organizations have their own operating model to deliver, because they know the customers well. They know the regulatory elements in the local regional level. But the initial organization redesign started off from an HQ from UK. What they wanted to do is they wanted to consolidate the operation of service providers from 35 service providers into kind of a tier one, handful of service providers with the tier two service providers underneath each other. So they've already designed or had the thought of operating model behind the closed doors before even I engaged. So that when I engaged with the team of people, they said, we want to achieve this goal, but this is what we have agreed to deliver. So therefore, these are the kind of common elements that I see in daily elements. And then part of the back of that as well, and one of the leaders did mention to me, oh, once I get my operating model designed and implemented it, I don't need to revisit again because I've got my structure right. I've got my management tiers right. I've got my decisions right. So what they're kind of doing it is the decisioning elements at the top level and actions to be implemented through the at the base level. If you look at the organization as a pyramid, there will be 3 tiers: the decisions made at the top, the middle management kind of receive those decisions and then push forward to the the execution or action that taking activities to the team to ensure that they deliver those outcomes as being decided by the top tier management at the top level. So they assume that the operating model is one of effort. And then we've also seen in mostly in the last decade or so, digital transformation as a common, every organization you speak to, the leaders will say we are undertaking digital transformation. More focuses on a kind of a technology and process elements of it. So digital transformation is nothing other than kind of looking at the organization end to end in a holistic way and a systemic way, and then driving those work aspects based on strategy, and then delivering the outcomes for employees and customers as well, really. So these are the common myths I kind of go into to say, we've done this, can you help us implement? Or we want to do this, or we want to achieve this structural model, can you help us how to deliver it? So those are kind of the challenges I've seen as well. And also I think the more of it also worth noting it that the design that these leaders have come up with, not challenging those designs or the outcomes. They assume that it's an ideal organization design is, that they come up with. What they don't tend to look at is there are different ways to approach the design. There are different outcomes you could develop through those design approaches as well. So therefore, there's, there are some merits of a specific design approach, and there are some limitations of those design approaches as well. So it's important to look at all dimensions of the work that needs to be undertaken, the purpose of that organization, the employee, the play for and purpose of them, and the outcomes that they are there to deliver to the customers and the stakeholders as well. So it's interesting that still in this DNA as well, we are kind of looking at the problem through a specific lens.
Great. So that's a very interesting perspective, Shan, that you have brought in, because some of the things that you did talk about are very real, and many a time we may actually start our exercise working with the org charts and like moving the lines and boxes and so on and so forth. So as you talk about some of the myths which you have experienced in your experience, what according to you is an org design all about if it is not structure and if it is not about working with the lines and boxes?
So for me, org design is a systematic and holistic approach. It's a process. It's you trying to take a look at from a strategic lens perspective. So what I tend to use, as I'm an EODF board member, and I tend to follow the EODF definition, which is an organization that has set up a systematic and holistic approach to aligning all parts of the organizations to achieve the defined strategic intent. Let's take the red approach. So approach is a process. It's a starting process. It's not a one-off element. It's a continuous evolution of those activities as well. And the second thing is, when we say all parts of the organizations, it's not just a structural box. It's about the work. It's about creating work for organizational employees to happily contribute, and they recognize, we all work for an organization because we resonate with their value they bring to the to their customers and the organization as a whole. So therefore we are there to deliver for that value as well. So it's all part of the organization, not only people elements, but also the work elements, the partnership that they engage with, internal and external partnership that they may have, and also the capabilities that they have to deliver their strategy intent as well. And then it's all about defining to the intent. The strategy is the key elements to drive that. So it's important to bring that, that perspective, organization design need to start out with the strategic intent rather than starting out with the problem. Let me give you an example. As I mentioned to you, a government organization, a banking industry, financial sector organization in UK. They've got presence service providers in India and Manila as well, and they have already defined the structure of how they wanted. They got underway a five-year transformation program in line with the UK government in a civil services policy to drive efficiency and cost effectiveness to deliver to their citizens as well. So what it means is they kind of had this, the structural model said, this is how our retail banking will operate. This is how our B2B banking will operate. But when I asked the question of, what are your strategic intent? What do you want to be known as in 5 years down the line? The purpose was not clearly defined. So the purpose for in a driven organization, we've seen day in, day out in the industry, that they are able to operate efficiently and more nimble and deliver services kind of 25% or 25% to 30% higher than the normal organization that they're are driving outcomes across, really. So it's important to drive from a strategic intent perspective, really. The third thing, finally, is establishing what that strategic intent means in simplifying the message across to the organization, not just only for the senior stakeholders, but also the team on the ground who are undertaking day-to-day activities and delivering the value to the customers facing across. The services that customers procure from that particular organization has to be defined and understandable to those employees as well. So that's where I kind of see it as an organization design coming into it. And then a lot of people talk about performance metrics and culture. Once you set the organization design and the approach taking, the operating model has been defined, it provides the outcome as the performance metrics, the behavior, and the culture will set in from there. You don't design the culture part of the operating model. You try and develop an operating model to deliver the culture you want to drive forward.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Shan and Arun, if you could just come towards the speaker, closer to the speaker, because the sound seems to be a bit low.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes, better? It's better. Yes.
Okay, sorry about it. Yeah.
Please continue. Yeah.
So how I try to run, take a very simple approach, organization design. And if you can move to the next slide, please. There are different ways to approach an organization design. There are different frameworks. Organization design has been evolving from 60s onwards, 1960s onwards, through the industrial innovations and as organizations transform forward through the technology as well. So there are different, as I said, frameworks. Gilbert Starr was launched, kind of published out in 1960s. He talked about kind of the 5 touch points. If you look at it, many of you know Gilbert Starr. He talks about the work first, and then looking from a work perspective, what work needs to be undertaken in line with the strategy to be delivered. And then he looked at the management structure, not looking at the organization structure, but looking at the management structure. How does the organization structure to deliver the outcome? And then he looks at the information and decision processes to drive how the decision gets driven, how does the decisions made and where the decisions need to be made and how it has been driven forward, because there could be decisions being made without data insight. There could be decisions made with data as well. So how does it all come in together? And then we talk about the people elements in relation to the STAR model. It's about how does the skills, what are the skills required to drive the efficiency forward and the outcomes forward as well, and also to complete the core and management tasks. And then we should not forget about the rewards. Rewards doesn't mean the financial rewards. It's about the soft reward, recognizing people who take the extra mile to deliver that value, because their purpose is to enjoy doing the work, and purpose is to deliver the outcome the organization set to deliver. So they recognize the value of the organization that they're working for. So they'll have all work together in an integral part. If you look at kind of the STAR model, there are each points connected together. If there's an impact on people, there'll be impact on rewards and information decision process. So that's critically important. Even if you're looking at the design for a whole organization or a particular function or a particular team, look at that elements of it, looking through the lenses as well. Over to you, Aaron.
Great. Thank you, Shan. Like that gives a complete systemic lens. And most importantly, also you re-emphasize the importance of ensuring an alignment around various elements in this particular system. So with that, that leads me to the next question, Shan. So if we look out into India, so there has been an emergence of many startups in the country or in the region, basically. At the same time, we also see some of these startups finding it difficult to scale or move to the next phase of growth. So while we were talking about this systemic lens of org design, in your experience, how do you think these startups could leverage these org design principles to reorganize themselves, or like for that matter, scale up in more sustainable a manner?
And another great question, Aaron. So startups, even if it's a large corporate or a startup, they each and every organization need to define their operating model. How they're going to operate, what are the work that they're going to undertake, how does the work will be performed, and what are the skills that do we need to have in the organization, and mostly what is our strategic intent. As startups, as you know, they start up off the ground with a great idea from the entrepreneurs. They come up and they get a few people into the team. They test their products and services, and then once they test the product, they kind of launch the product into more of a productionized and the large scale elements. What they tend to do is to forget the strategy they'd set initially as well. So it is important for their growth elements is to start out with the strategy. Once they identify the target market and the customer needs, that strategy will be in place to say, what are the goals you want to achieve? And what are the kind of the well-defined business models and the value propositions you want to deliver? So that will kind of articulate what the work needs to be undertaken, the core work that needs to be undertaken. So the strategy is a starting point for any organization, whether it's small scale, a medium scale, or enterprise level. Strategy has to be the input to drive that forward. Then the startups are kind of need guidance and support from a leadership perspective. The entrepreneurs take the leadership role as they start through. But when the organization kind of grow and mature, they need a kind of a different leadership elements, because those leaders, they kind of recognize the market, they recognize what the services their customers are needed. But the secondary leadership elements that are required is to guide the organization the right direction, support and be the mentor for those employees who are working across, because it's absolutely critical. Mentoring elements is critical to drive that efficiency and understand what the employees are kind of undertaking. How could we help the employees skilled up with the latest elements of it as well? And then not only the kind of building up the existing assets of people and the resources as well, but also need to identify what talents do we need when we move into the next market, or kind of higher end of the market. How do we retain those experts and talents are kind of definitely one of the leadership elements. Is what, as you probably know, we would have heard about learning organization. How do you keep the organization continuously learning as well, really? So those are the kind of things that we need to think about it. And then not only just ongoing training, also learning elements, but the mindset of the entire team need to kind of go into the growth and innovation mindset. So the leadership is critical to lead that, those teams to drive that outcomes as well. They need to build a competitive differentiator capabilities. When I call competitive differentiator, all organizations have a standard marketing, sales function capabilities, operational capabilities. They need to establish what is their differentiators, and based on that, they should build the capabilities to, leapfrog into the market to kind of compete against the already established market presence leaders and also upcoming entrepreneurs, businesses as well. So they need to identify those capabilities and build that. So when people talk about capability, a lot of common myth are people think it's technology. Technology is one of those elements. However, for me, its capabilities is about people, process, technology, data, and governance. So you need to think all those 5 elements as well. And then they also need to kind of understand how do we improve the existing processes into more of a repeatable, efficient ways of working. When you scale up, you cannot follow, keep doing the same work in the same way as you've done, a few years ago, a few months ago. But when you're ready to scale up, you need to start thinking about automation. How can you bring new technologies like of AI, driven elements of it, really? And then from a senior leadership perspective, when they start, or the entrepreneur, the leader who started the organization, they're well versed to saying something that has worked in the past well doesn't mean that it will continue to work well in the future as well. So that mindset need to be changed and ability to move forward. So therefore, what I'm trying to say, that leadership will enable us to guide those leaders, guide those employees, and drive the the scale up as well. What I call is in kind of the 2 elements of elements of it. One is kind of the tactical driven approach, where organizations have got the strategy, they've got the plans, they know how they're driving. But the second thing is adaptability, is the ability to shift towards right or left from the plan and able to take services out to the market and test it. If the startups are kind of more in the kind of adaptive way, they might miss out the North Star position. If the startups are in the kind of the tactical approach, they might miss out on the adaptive approach as well. So it needs to get that right balance. That's where the leadership drives it forward, really.
Great. Thanks a lot, Shan. So that was quite insightful. So considering like we are somewhere at the mid of this conversation, I'm just wondering if it may be a good idea to take a pause and hear out for any questions and reflections from the group out here, just to tap onto the wisdom of the group too before we go ahead with the conversation.
Sure. Actually, there are a number of questions being posted. I'll just touch upon one at this point, which has been raised by Maheshwari Jani. Organizations have always lived with structures. So now that when we bring in changes, how can one prepare for the change? Any thoughts on that?
It's a great question. Organizations, is changing the mindset, how do you drive that forward? It's about not saying structure is the right thing. If you take an example of a structure, look at a structure in the front. Does it tell you how work is done? Work is being done? Does it give you an insight where the decisions will be made? Does it give you what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? Some of these key questions need to be asked, really. And what is it, why do we need a change now? There are some external and internal events that are driving force behind this change. So therefore, the structural elements won't be able to drive that. That's the reason the change is critical to establish through kind of an organization design lens. When it comes, once you've done the design as well, and also it's worth mentioning it, it's like I call it social and technical system elements. Social is about when the organization is not ready to accept change, when there are kind of a pushback from the teams below the senior leadership who are not ready to, because they're not being involved as part of the change journey at all. So it's very hard to embrace those changes and involve them as well to drive that. But there are elements where they push top down and say, this is the change need to be executed. But those changes may not be right change across as well. So it's important to look at it a multi-dimensional view. Use a simple star model. My recommendation, use a simple star model as outlined on the slide. Just ask the simple question. with the change or request it, can we continue to do the work that we're required to do, or do we need to change our work patterns? Oh, when I call it work patterns, it's all about the work. How does the structure going to help us? Do we need to think about different structural, which can be flexible when I talk about tactical and adaptive model? Do we need to have an adaptive model structure, which can enable us to take to market some of the services and test from our customers what they're saying? And then how does the decision flow? Where does the decision need to be made? Who makes that decision? I also touched on 3 elements of it: sense making, decision making, action taking. So decisions are always made at the top level of the pyramid. Sense making and action taking is made at the kind of the executional level. There is definitely a break between the top and the execution level. We need to think about how can we bring that structure and nimble model such that the senior leaders do work with the the leaders and the team on the ground, so they establish what has been undertaken and they can make the right decision to help to drive that forward. And senior leaders need to also create a space for teams to make the relevant decisions rather than they making the decisions as well. So it's all encompassing of rather than the structure driven forward. Sandhya.
That helps, Shan. Another question from Maheshwari itself. When there is a change in the organization, some of the roles become redundant and they are asked to let go. How can they be equipped for the future? Is the responsibility of the organization or is it personal?
It's another great question. So the question to ask, when there's a change take place, there are certain roles may not exist, agree totally. But what it needs to be looked at is what those roles are playing. What work, is it a specific talent, a specific task or specific core work, a specialist role that are being taken off because the organization could not operate anymore in that because of the technologies come on board? Or is there a common work that needs to be looked at? So again, I will recommend, from that angle perspective, look at the work. If it's a specialist, group that specialist work and identify how that specialist work can be retained and developed. So again, I did see comments coming across about learning organization going forward. Yes. So once you identify the job roles, rather than the people or name associated to that job, look at the work, group together the core work that needs to be done and the management work that needs to be. When I call it management, it's all the governance and assurance and oversight activities that needs to be fulfilled with the core work. And then once you kind of group together, then you could then look at it. Has the organization made a mistake in kind of letting go of some of the specialist role, and they're now into the gap of recruiting new specialists, or have they got the learning and development capability in the organization such that the existing the skills can be enhanced, and also the teams can be enhanced to operate in that specialist mode as well. So there is the one specific answer to say if resource or kind of specific roles are being taken off the organization structure, but it needs to be looked at from a strategic intent perspective and then work backwards to say, how do we drive that forward really?
Thanks, Shan. I think, Arun, we can continue. There are questions coming in. We'll take it up again at a later point.
Great. Thank you, Sandhya. So, Shan, just building on to the questions that is already coming up, while we did talk about the startup lens, we also observe in the country many captive centers emerging up, or for that matter, in pursuit of de-risking and the organization setting up their footprints over here in India.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we also see some of those traditional models of the large corporates getting disrupted by the new age firms. Large or to combat some of these external pressures and also to sustain in such a competitive environment.
So let's kind of look at that question in 2 parts. One part is kind of, we all know the large corporate organizations are structured around the teams. They've got a specific cultural elements of it. When there's a global organization operated from, as you touched on, HQ, designing and defining their future operating model and pushing down to the regional operational teams to implement them. It's all kind of cultural elements that's already been there for a long time. What it means is, again, touching on the decision point. Decisions are being made at the hierarchical, the kind of the pyramid level. If you kind of break the pyramid level into 3 levels, the top level is the decisions to be made. The set actions being asked to take at the kind of the executional level. That's where people are kind of looking at the kind of the understanding it. Will that work? Will that not work? There isn't any pushback to the decision makers to say, oh, this we have tried and tested, it hasn't been worked in the past. So the sense making is kind of not done at the kind of the senior leadership, but it's kind of done on the action level. When you go back to the senior leaders and say, these decisions may not implement, may not enable us to drive the value that we are, focusing on delivering it, the senior leaders will say, no, we've already decisions been made. So there's already a break. So therefore, what it needed is to kind of have the kind of the sense making, what we are here to do, what's our purpose for the organization, what value are we here to deliver for our customers, then decision making to understand what are those decisions we need to undertake, how well are we set up to deliver those purposes, and then actionable elements of how do those actions going to translate and deliver value to our customers and stakeholders. We are here. Each of the organizations there to deliver value to our customers, and that's how they operate. And if they don't have customers, the organization cannot sustain at all. So therefore, we need to look at those 3 angles in those elements of it as well. And I also touched on the tactical approach and the adaptive way. The tactical elements is kind of the strategic, strategies being defined, the plans being defined, already in place. Sometimes we've seen organizations not really communicating the strategy to the teams on the ground who are executing the work on a day-to-day basis. The strategy is misinterpreted and all those kind of things. So that is kind of the tactical elements. And then adaptive elements, the ability to move from the planned elements and driving forward the outcomes of it. It needs to be balanced right. You can't go on one way and assume that they can compete with the upcoming new brands, new entrepreneurs, new ideas coming into the market. They need to manage it in a kind of a holistic way and systemic way. When there is a need, they need to think about adaptive ways of driving forward, really.
And Shan, as you talk about some of these aspects around the alignment, the flow of information and where the decisions are being made, and how do we drive an alignment of the entire organization towards the larger objectives and the mission. Probably if I may like to share my reflection. At least in India, I see one iconic organization which comes immediately to my mind is something called Amul, which has a very perfect example of how it aligns the entire organization and the people to its mission. And interestingly, when I talk about people, it doesn't look at the people only within the organizational boundaries. Perfect case in point is if we look out onto the Amul's structure, it largely has a 3-layered structure where at the entry point, we have the entire set of farmers or the village society, which is actually the procurement unit. And there comes in the second layer of union population, which typically processes the entire of the product that comes by, and then there is a federation which is there to market the thing. So probably this is something which immediately lands in my mind on how when we talk about the people to get organized around the larger mission, not restricting only within the boundaries of the organization, but also looking beyond the boundaries of the organization involving the societies. And 2, very much resonates with your point on how the entire of the layer gets integrated for the decision flow to happen, for the resources to be shared across, and the most importantly, how the revenue gets shared or how the profit model gets shared. And that's where to your systemic element or how the rewards is also one of the key systemic element to drive the desired behavior or like to drive the intended outcome from the design. So this is something like which just immediately lands in my mind. So with that, Shan, like I'm also hopeful like you would have seen multiple such examples in many global corporates, including the IT services firm and so on and so forth. So would you like to share any such examples also on how the organizations have leveraged such an alignment to achieve its larger strategic intent?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you probably know, the new trend has been post-pandemic has been the hybrid working going forward, really. So it's all about focus on, people, the employees' elements, the well-being, the reskills, redesigning of this organization, how it needs to be fit, and also bringing the external elements of it as well. So one of the examples I touched on, the kind of the utilities organization globally based operating best operating regions in UK, US, Dublin, and other European countries as well. What they looked at is looking from a purpose perspective. They looked at in delivering the services. What do they deliver services? They deliver energy to the all the households in the country they operate in. They deliver service elements to repair some of the energy systems, like heating systems or air conditioning systems. So when you look at all of that, there are elements of customers involved. There are elements of the upstream and downstream energy service providers, because all the energy providers cannot be kind of generate energy, so they have to buy energy from other third-party elements as well, other organizations. And then there are elements of people, engineers, who are delivering some of the services on behalf of their customers in this particular organization. So there are third parties involved as well. So by bringing all interactions, or kind of the partners and the external and internal organization together, it helps to design the organization's operating model more a holistic way. And one of the myths I touched on is doing the operating model behind the doors will not enable us to deliver value at all. It will kind of articulate what is expected from a team perspective, but it would not deliver. So therefore, when you're kind of doing the operating model design or through the organization design process, it's always critical to identify who those teams are, who those the external factors are going to be impacted, likes of employee unions or any kind of partners. Bring them together early on in the phase and drive that synergy to say, this is what the outcome we're trying to achieve. This is our strategy. Because strategy is not, as a hidden agenda. Strategy is a well-known agenda for in the industry as well. So that particular organization would have published their strategy. So therefore, they need, it's an open forum to bring together, get their feedback. And also, if you identify which teams are going to be impacted, you're more likely to engage them early on and getting their buy-in and support as well. The change can be implemented very fast in a nimble way. Otherwise, they're going to resist and saying, this is not going to be. But it's all those elements need to be considered. And exactly to your point, Arun, Amol, looked at all the farmers element, all the supply chain elements, all those bringing together that are able to share the common value and the purpose of the organization driving forward, really.
Great, Shan. So with the interest of time, since we are at the top of the hour, having talked about on multiple of these aspects, in summary, Shan, like what do you think are the top 3 or 5 questions that an HR practitioner or like a business leader should take into consideration while approaching the org design exercise? Or what are some of the key mistakes that one needs to be cognizant to avoid while getting into this space?
So my advice will be when your organization leaders engage with you on a kind of the organization design or operating model elements of it, ask simplest question: what has it changed? What changes has impacted your organization that the leaders want you to undertake the organization design. It may be something like, I'm a new leader into the organization. I need to show something to my leadership team that I've changed my organization structure. That isn't what it needs to be the intent. It needs to be looked at, why is the organization not able to deliver the value as is planned, and what are the strategic intents are. And then we need to understand how these environmental changes influence the strategic intent. So i.e., are these influences recent? Are they been behind, been there for a long time, not being considered by the organization leaders? Or are we kind of forecasting some of the challenges that we may see it in the future? So hence the sustainable operating elements are critical to establish, such that the strategic intent can be delivered through the STAR model lens. Again, I will kind of iterate. The STAR model tells you the touch points, and you can look at the STAR model perspective and say, if I change the people elements, what will my work look like? If I change the work, how would my structure look like? How would the reward look like? So it helps you to answer those questions. These are tools there out for you to ask the right question and understand what it needs to be undertaken. And then I understand from your leaders what outcome they wanted to do. It's not about restructure. It's not about moving the boxes. What are the ultimate outcomes they wanted to do? Even if you're doing it at a functional level, at the team level, go back to the strategy and identify how does your change will enable delivering those outcomes. And then need to ask the question of, what changes do we need to make at each element of the STAR element? I touched on it. Do we, if we do the structures change, do we need to go back from a HR perspective, the rewards mechanism, the recognition mechanism? I talk about rewards, I talk about the soft elements of it, recognizing those individuals who are doing the extra mile and kind of living to the organization's purpose. And what options are there? How do we go about the design process? It's not about designing one-off. It's about iterative process. It's quite easy. In my experience, organization leaders have said, oh, can you do this design for us in 6 weeks? What they are missing at, the scope element. You need to understand what that scope limits. You need to identify and get them to sign off the scope, because their interpretation of the scope, it may be different to interpretation of your own scope. So you need to kind of get the sponsor to agree it, and also the senior leaders to agree it as well. And as we kind of bring together the teams together, again, don't do your the design in isolation. Bring teams together that are impacted, bring them together, because they know the work that they undertake. You may not be well placed to understand the work. You may know at the highest level, but the detail level is important, what decisions are needed. So ask these questions using the STAR model, then will help you to drive those approach more holistically and systemic way.
And maybe Shan, like what also lands on me is probably also asking a question on what kind of change management would be needed after we design the entire of the thing, or like where would the resistance be typically faced when the rubber hits the road, would also help in terms of getting in the right set of people at the beginning of the entire of the value chain towards designing the process, is what I could also pick up from what you're saying, Shan.
Correct. You're spot on as well. So when I kind of talk about social and technical milestone, if your leaders are not ready for the change, or if your teams are not ready for the change, take a step back. That is my guidance, because what you can't do is the successful change will not go in place in time. You will be facing resistance. You will not be able to deliver. The cost, cost of doing design will rise, enormously. So it's important to bring that social element in the forefront before the technical elements are delivered across, really. So the change curve is absolutely need to be assessed where the leaders are, where the teams are, and drive that forward, really.
Great. Thank you, Shan. So with that, while also holding sensitivity to time where we have slightly overshot the time, just curious, Sandhya, like, are there any more questions that needs to be taken at this juncture? And how do we proceed?
Yes, so we do have questions. I think in time we'll take two, and the remaining, I guess you will respond to them. We will share with you separately so that you can respond to them individually. The first question is by Sudharani. She says, is the change in organizational operating models an increased phenomenon in the recent times? If yes, why do you think this sudden evolution of models?
It's a great question. It's not in increasing elements of it. It's about the sustainability of the organization going forward. So if you don't have a right operating model, it has the ability to kind of face off any resistance from external events, or ability to operate and deliver how the customer mindsets are changing, behaviors are changing, then it's going to be a challenge for organization to look at it. And also the second thing was worth mentioning it, that it's linked to the strategic strategy of the organization. If the organization want to kind of pivot into the business model into a different sector or different element, then definitely there needs to be a operating model, a lens look through, because operating model underpins all of those strategy and business model as well. So it's critical to look at all those elements of it, but the events may dictate whether it's need an operating model, how operating model change, or whether you look at the existing operating model and say, right, we've defined it to a level that is suitable enough to deliver our strategy in the next 2 to 3 years. Don't look at 10 years strategy, because within 10 years you will get a number of changes as well. What is your 2 to 3 year plan? What are the gaps? How can you fulfill those gaps? So there are ways to look at it in those dimensions. Here, the STAR model to look at will help you to identify what are those gaps within the current element. So that's a way to take it forward. Arun, any thoughts to add from your experience as well?
Well, probably like nothing more to add in at this juncture, Shan. So we could also take up the other questions.
Yeah, so the next question is by Dr. Nandish. With hybrid working models coming here to stay, what better organization designed to manage workforce outside of an organization? Any possible, what's better organization designed to manage workforce outside of an organization?
So it's a great, interesting. I think to look at the hybrid ways of working in kind of, I would say, in the 3 lens, and once you look at those 3 lens, you'll be able to establish how it needs to be transformed. Really, what need to establish what is a hybrid working means from an organization perspective. In a manufacturing world, can an engineering team operate in a kind of off-site basis? Probably not, because there are manufacturing plants need to be operated at and stuff like that. So therefore it needs to be in hybrid ways, and when and how those decisions need to be made, and by which team need to undertake those work. So that needs to be defined from an what do they want in the future elements. The second thing is healthy living and working. It's about redesigning the work. So when I kind of reuse some of the example of manufacturing again, how can we redesign work where it is a playful and purposeful work for those teams who are operating it? You don't want someone to just do a day in, day out data input or anything like that. There are technologies out there. How can it drive that forward? The third thing is, how can technology like automation or AI enable those redesign of the work with more powerful and playful and purposeful elements of it as well? So once you look at those 3 elements of it, that's when you'll be able to look at it. How can we redesign the hybrid ways of outside the organization? Because it touches people's elements of it. And you could not force from an economical or emotional. That was I call it kind of a negative motivation. So you need to develop a positive motivation through kind of playful purpose and also the driving outcomes efficiently, so that people enjoy doing the work, and it will enable organization to set whether it's a hybrid or a face-to-face as well. I recognize different regions have different challenges because of the technology limitations. The organizations are not able to deliver, but this all need to be considered as a end-to-end as part of the redesign activities.
I just want to take one more question because
Go for
I
it.
think it's pretty relevant. Can you share an example in terms of an organization which had a tough time because of the change in org design?
So yes, great example. I'll retouch on the one that I picked up with regards to the utility sector. When you're operating in a multi-region element, there are events that we need to consider, and specifically the industries these clients operate in, likes of energy utility. They all have to bound and managed through a specific regulatory compliance. So all work that needs to be undertaken need to be within those regulatory compliance. The second thing is client element of it, the customers whose behavior of interaction with the energy utility companies are different. How do you bring them connecting like the financial bank on the banking the high street? Because we today engage with the banks on a daily basis because we look at our account, whether our funds are there, have we moved the funds between accounts and stuff like energy utilities. We only once in a while interact with them if the price goes up, and we kind of take the phone and scream, oh, why is the price going up? But other than that, we pay the bill. So it's harder to engage the customers. So you need to look at engaging customers. The third thing is, how do you deliver more of an adaptive way of that engagement? So what does it mean from a customer perspective? So again, utilizing, I could be a customer from a B2C perspective. I am a homeowner with the energy being, I buy the energy from this particular organization. That I could be also business owner having a business premises, getting the. So I expect as a customer having the same experience, but at the same time, I'm also an employee of the organization. How does it reflect it? So the challenge is making the right balance is critical. And that's why, and I kind of call the design from an organization design perspective, identify who your stakeholders are, identify the teams that need to be impacted, identify the work that needs to be undertaken, let it be playful and purposeful driven, and then identify how you're going to reward those individuals who are doing that purposeful work, who value your organization's purpose really, and then identify how do you enable going forward learning elements of it. So yes, the organization design activities are not, can be done overnight. It can be done within 3 weeks or 4 weeks. The scope is, my experience of so many big organization design, the scope itself takes 6 weeks minimum to lock it down, because you have to take all the elements of it and drive it. So yes, there are challenges, but it is the kind of the approach and the process you take it forward, really. Sorry, it's a long answer, but I needed to kind of give that importance of that, because it's not a one-off activity.
Thank you so much, Shan. I think it really helps. I think in the interest of time, we will not be able to take any more questions. But there have been comments on the chat box. I will share that with you separately, Shan Arun. Yeah. On behalf of NHRD Bangalore, I'd like to thank both of you and thank you for taking time out for this session. We will stay in touch. For all those who are present on the webinar, please note that the recording of this session will be shared on the YouTube channel of NHRD Bangalore. You can share the same and inform your colleagues and friends. This will be uploaded in the next 2 to 3 days. So thank you so much. And Arun and Shan, if you could just go to the slide before, your contact details are available there. So if anyone wants to reach out to you directly, please go ahead and do so. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Sandhya, and thank you all those who attended it. As kind of Arun and I outlined it, happy to answer any questions. Reach out to us on a one-to-one basis. And again, we offer mentoring services. For me, it's about mentoring and building the community is critical. So, reach out to us anytime. And I also deliver masterclasses, so happy to talk about that. And also large group interventions, which will enable you all to deliver your organization design in a successful way. So these are the contact elements. Connect us through LinkedIn or via email as well. Thank you for time, Sandhya, and thanks for the giving the opportunity to share my experience with the wider community here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.